Good evening, afternoon, morning, night, whenever you find it most convenient to grab an energy drink that's not based in Austria and join us at the Bonfire. I, as always, am Alan, the pole with the goal, joined by my co-host DJ.
Hello, I am returned.
As well as Tim.
That is just like the extent to which you were just like begging for a Celsius sponsorship right there. Was I mean, it was clear and obvious. Let me put it that way. Which, by the way, Celsius, if you want to give us some money, we would gladly.
That is true. Even though I don't drink Celsius, I've tried it and it's way too much for me. But still, nonetheless, if you want to sponsor us, feel free. We are also joined,
and that chance of sponsorship is gone.
All right. And we are also joined by a special guest. We have Nick from Glass House Soccer. How have you been, man?
Hey, I'm doing all right, other than the results, obviously, and special guest. I appreciate the title. People have referred to me as special in the past, but special guest, I like it. That works for me.
This is fantastic news. So yeah, let's get right into the news before we get to the meat of the section. We have some new MLS rules. Again, some new roster rules. Tim, could you take us through these new roster rules real quick?
So yeah, this is based on reporting from. So it's actual reporting. It's not a rumor. Paul Tenorio from The Athletic was at the MLS governors meeting, and he reported that there are changes that are being proposed. They still need to be, I guess, kind of like ratified, and a lot of them would have to be discussed with the MLS Players Association. Which, you know, I mean, this is all like positive money stuff for them. So you would think that they would probably be willing to be, you know, play a game with it, but it's, you know, it's not set in stone yet. But the hope is that these rules would come into place for the summer transfer window. And the three basic outlines, or the basic outline of like the three changes are, first, there will be a second buyout available to every team. So the Fire have currently used their one buyout. The buyouts changed. Initially, it was only available to teams in the preseason or like outside of the season. Now, as of a few years ago, it is available to teams at any point in the year. If they would like a player to move on, they can buy them out, which means they have to pay them the full amount of their agreed contract, but they no longer have to be on the roster or have a salary cap hit or anything like that. It's like they were deleted. So if the player is like a DP, they get the DP slot back. So it costs actual money, but it does allow teams that have an owner willing to spend the money to say, oops, we made a mistake, the opportunity to get a roster spot back if they feel like they made a mistake with a roster build. The plan is that would go from 1 per year, which the Fire have already used theirs, to having 2 per year, which would enable the Fire or other teams to take a second player and basically just, you know, pay them the full amount of their contract and remove them from the roster so that they would be free agents and could sign first anywhere in MLS or anywhere in the world if they so chose. The second change is to transfer revenue. Under the current system, there's a maximum amount, which this season is around $1.2 million, that teams can get in GAM, which is, you know, MLS funny money, whenever a player is transferred basically to any league abroad. So when the Fire sold John Duran for roughly $25 million, that transfer, they were only able to take about 1.1 million of that in GAM, and that was it. So the downside of that is that there really isn't any incentive if you're trying to get more GAM to having larger transfers, and teams that were able to sell, say, 2 much like lower tier players abroad for around 1.1 million each would end up with more transfer money than the Fire, who had like a blockbuster deal. The plan is to change that so that it's going to be a flat $3 million cap per year of transfer money that a team is able to convert into GAM. So if that rule had been in place when the Fire traded sold John Duran or Gaga Slanina, they would have been able to recoup that full $3 million in that one transfer. Now, the downside of it, of course, is that if a team were able to sell like 4 or 5 players or whatever for 7-figure fees, they would end up with less GAM because it's a hard cap. Still, like, that does ultimately provide more incentive for teams to sell players, because for some teams, and this is sort of this won't really affect Thiago Melo in Atlanta, but the rumor is the price on his head is something like the $30 million range. And all Atlanta would get in terms of being able to invest more in the roster if they sold him would be the spot that he occupied on the roster back, as well as 1.2 million. So this bumps it up to 3, which is, it's a change I think a lot of people will welcome. And the third essentially decouples designated player slots from the U22 slots. And this is getting like a little inside baseball-ish, but they're designated players are players that earn more than like a certain salary amount, and they hit the cap at a lower amount. Xherdan Shaqiri is one of the better paid players in the league. He's a designated player. The U22 slots are available to basically try to bring in young talent. And they allow teams to spend unlimited amounts on transfers to bring them in, but the amount that the players are actually paid is capped. The way that it has worked now is that if a team has 3 designated players that are what are called senior DPs, so over the age of 25, or if they're earning more than around $1.6 million, they would only get 1 U22 slot. Teams that only have 2 of those, if the third designated player is what's called a young designated player, so that's someone, I believe, under the age of 25, then they would have access to all 3 U22 slots. So the way that this would impact the Fire essentially is that as it stands right now, the Fire have all 3 U22 slots used with Georgios Koutsias, Federico Navarro, and Brian Gutierrez. Right now, Gaston Jimenez is the Fire's third DP. He's earning under that like salary hit maximum, but if he was to be moved off that DP slot in the summer, which I think has been the Fire's plan based on what they've said, before this rule change occurs, they would have had to get a young designated player. So that's a younger player, less experienced, potentially more upside, but also like less proven. They wouldn't have been able to get like another like Hugo Kuipers as an example. With this rule change, they would be able to get like a second Hugo Kuipers. And that I think really gives teams a little bit more flexibility with the roster. I think that for the Fire this season in particular, the thing that's going to affect them most is going to be that change to just the second buyout, because it will let them basically delete one player that they think isn't really performing the way that they thought that they should from the roster and bring someone else in. And I've been talking for way too long.
Well, I'll tell you, Tim, it sounds great. It sounds like all 3 of these rules actually play off of each other pretty well, where you can get rid of, say, an old contract, reinvest in some youth, and get a little bit more money out of it. So it seems like there was some sort of cohesive plan when they put all of this stuff together. But do you think that this is going to drive spending up in MLS on top of it? Or do you think, for me, it sounds like they're still very focused on building a lot of the infrastructure around these clubs as well. Because why just go from 1.2 GAM to 3? Why not 5? Why not 7? It sounds like they still want clubs to reinvest in academies and facilities and everything else that goes on with it.
Yeah, I think that's the plan. Paul in his reporting basically said that these changes are mid-year changes. And so what that does is it enables teams to kind of spend a little bit more money and get a little bit bigger in time for the summer transfer window, which is the time when like most talent around the world is available, is when like talent in Europe is available because it's their off season. But that this isn't like the end of the road. Like this is just sort of like maybe a halfway step to more changes down the line. I also just realized that I forgot to explain, like there's a nuance with that, like 3 DPs and 3 U22s, plan where teams can also go down to 2 DPs and then get a 4th U22 player and then additional GAM. So like additional funny money to spend on the roster. So that I think is an interesting twist. Cause it's the first time that MLS is really kind of giving teams like a choice, like a choose your own adventure thing where you like choose to go down one path. Before that, the rules basically all incentivized teams to spend on the roster in more or less the same way. Teams could spend less, and a lot of teams did. But if you wanted to spend, like all MLS, like high end rosters, ended up looking fairly similar. Like no one's really, spending DP slots on center backs. It's very rare to see it for a goalie. And then the U20, this now basically lets a team say, we're going to, spend on like high end superstars like Leo Messi, maybe like, which is obviously not every team can get a Messi because there's only one. Or, teams could kind of, with the 2 DPs and the additional GAM, they could really like spread the roster money around and for the first time ever have, basically a starting 11 of all players that were earning over $1 million a year if they wanted to. And that's the first time that that's happened. Now, the exchange would be that like only 2 of those players could be like real like superstars or like high end talent if they wanted it to be. But I thought that was, particularly interesting.
One thing I just have to say when it comes to roster rules, I think Tata Martino said it after Miami's loss in the Champions Cup, is that MLS needs to restructure roster rules so that it can essentially just compete with other leagues, that in the sense that the moment when a player is either suspended or injured or something happens, that it doesn't become a huge problem as it would be in other leagues where roster rules aren't that restrict as they are in MLS. That's sort of my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think that's the direction that things are heading. The issue is that there's some owners, including Joe Mansueto with the Fire, that have wanted to spend more, and a lot of owners that have kind of wanted to like hold the line and not spend too much.
Ooh.
Sounds like they're kind of stuck in like MLS 2.0 problem.
Some of them really wish it was still MLS 1.0.
What, you guys don't love going to games in baseball stadiums and football stadiums?
Ooh, tomato.
Yeah. We've definitely heard of it from other coaches too in CONCACAF Champions League in the past, saying they've got 3 DPs playing against 11 DPs. I think was one of the quotes that came out. So I like the international competitiveness of it. And I think that's great that that's the way that they want to structure things and move forward and keep it moving. We definitely need to increase the spending. And I was definitely going somewhere with this, and I totally lost it while I was trying to remember it. But the one thing I do remember is Tim, anytime you say, funny money, MLS funny money, I just picture Don Garber with like a Mr. Monopoly mustache and like bags of cash. Like that's the image that goes through my head when you say MLS funny money. So just flow that out there as well.
I'm not saying Tim
it's
has those photos on hand, but I'm just saying Tim has some info on Don Garber.
I just wish there was like an actual physical currency for GAM and TAM that like had to be like, it's not even like a check. Like you had to like actually like mail Monopoly funny money to another team. Like, dear Colorado Rapids, here is the money that we owe you for this player. And it's like a suitcase full of money because it's, all like $1 bills or something.
Yeah.
They have to meet in an underpass, exchange briefcases. I'm with you. I think there's some real marketability here, some good social media content.
I love this. All right. Does this mean it is time to... Oh, there's also one other thing you had that Infantino addresses MLS. What's that about, Tim?
So, yeah, Giovanni Infantino, the FIFA president, addressed MLS. This is the first time that a sitting FIFA president has ever addressed Major League Soccer, like the Board of Governors. I thought it's significant because it I think, and he discussed basically this is again on reporting from Paul Tenorio at The Athletic, but basically it was kind of a call to action from Infantino to MLS to sort of like think bigger, spend more, take advantage of the fact that there are, 3 and potentially 4 huge soccer events happening in the United States and North America more generally, between now and 2026 or 2027, with Copa America this summer, the Club World Cup in 2025, the Men's World Cup in 2026, and potentially the Women's World Cup in 2027, all happening here. So I thought that was interesting. And the other part of that backdrop is it's a few days after FIFA stopped fighting or fighting a lawsuit against a promotion company that had wanted to have regular season league matches outside of the host country. So as it stood as of like 2 weeks ago, there could never be like a regular season La Liga match or a Premier League match outside of Spain or, England or, maybe potentially the UK more broadly, if a Welsh team made it back up to the Premier League, but they have to be in the home country. That had been contested by a company that wanted to have regular season matches basically wherever they wanted, as a way similar to the way that we see like those like summer series matches. FIFA stopped fighting the lawsuit when it was pretty clear that they were going to not be successful at it. And as a result, it's possible that in coming years, like there could be regular season Premier League, La Liga, Liga MX matches in the United States, which obviously could be a real threat to Major League Soccer and the product that they have, because it means like like we've seen like those like summer series matches, like there's one coming up, featuring like AC Milan this summer in Chicago. They sell out Soldier Field or sell out 2/3 of Soldier Field. There are 40,000 people there. The ticket prices are 2 to 3 to 4 times what they are for a Fire match. And if that's what's happening for basically a friendly, imagine what would happen if it was a regular season match. And like every Arsenal fan was able to see Arsenal at Soldier Field or something like that.
I mean, you look at the success of those NFL games in London, and I think maybe that's part of the model, but obviously the Miami lawsuit, the promo group, I thought they were out of Miami, or I thought that Miami was going to host some of these international games. That's why I said it. But I mean, you see the popularity of it, but hopefully they can take, then if that is the case, and I get what you're saying about MLS, maybe a little fearful for their product, but you take it and market it and roll it into something. They've been doing it already with a lot of these other friendlies. I mean, I'm sure you guys get all the emails from the Fire organization about, oh, look at all these international friendlies and things we got going on here. And it's through the Fire emails. So hopefully they can make it work. But I get what you're saying, that it could threaten a few MLS ticket purchases. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, especially I think the big threat is Liga MX is the most watched soccer league in the United States. And there's like, as it stands right now, like the Mexican Football Federation schedules a lot of their men's national team matches in the United States because they make a lot more revenue. They're giant stadiums. They're able to fill out NFL buildings at like a very high ticket price. And I think that the fear is like if you're a smaller Liga MX team like FC Juarez or whatever, and you've got a regular season match against Club America, like your option is holding it at your 25,000 seat home venue, which would sell out. But I mean, in Juarez, or you could host it at like Soldier Field, sell out Soldier Field at a much higher ticket price. And then the question is like, if people are buying, Liga MX tickets in Chicago, are there going to be people that aren't buying MLS tickets in Chicago?
So what you're saying is if they do this, then Leagues Cup is in trouble because they'll just go to their Liga MX game. That what you're saying, Tim? No more Leagues Cup because of this?
I think Leagues Cup is as safe as Don Garber can possibly make it. That thing is like wrapped in multiple layers of like bubble wrap and blankets, and it's in a very safe baby carriage. It is as secure as Don Garber can possibly keep it.
Ooh.
I will say too.
Tomato.
I will say too. One thing very important about MLS is there's going to actually kind of be a how far can MLS progress, because the US is hosting in 26, but it's almost guaranteed to host in 38 too. So if in the next 12 years the MLS can actually expand, that's probably going to be a major factor in everything, because you have basically 10 years before 2038 becomes big and everything. Where if MLS can expand in that time period, that's great. If they can't, then that is really not going to look good on the international level.
Yeah, I think that it really is like the 1994 World Cup, which, most of you are not old enough to remember, but like that really had a huge impact, I think, on the way that people looked at soccer in this country, and the way that the world looked at American soccer. And I think that 2026 is sort of like the coming of age thing where it's here, like it's clearly a massive sport, but I mean, no one's expecting the US to win the 26 World Cup. And soccer, MLS is obviously not on the same scale as like, the NFL or the NBA in terms of its like general appeal. And I think that the challenge is going to be for that to change. You're right, because based on where FIFA's allowing World Cups to happen in 2038, it's almost certainly going to be back in North America. And if it is like the United States, you'd think would be, if not the sole host, at least one of the hosts.
I'm a little upset you think I'm too young to not remember. 94, man. I was at the game in Soldier Field. I was watching my home country of Greece get absolutely shellacked by Bulgaria 4-0 in that match, watching Hristo Stoichkov before he joined the Fire. So no, I was there, man.
Yeah, man. That game, that I think that was one of, I think, the better performances that Stoichkov ever had on the world stage. And unfortunately, it came at the expense of Greece. But I mean, 10 years later, you guys did get a major tournament victory out of nowhere. So,
oh, for sure. And everybody knows, every Greek knows that the whole Greek team was just partying in Greektown the night before that game. Like, they may have gone from Greektown to Soldier Field to dress for that game. They didn't care.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So low expectations. But hey, that's not why we're not here to talk about Greece's past.
Nope.
Speaking about low expectations.
Let me tee that up for you.
So, yeah. The Fire, they played recently against a energy drink team that says they're from New York, but actually they played New Jersey. And it ended in a draw, a 0-0 draw. It was a game of the century. I'll say that. Well, maybe in this century. It was a game.
It was a game that was played in this century.
It was a game that was played in this century. Thank you, Tim. Yeah, score ended 0-0. There were like a few, like, I guess, moments that we're going to go and highlight, but there wasn't really anything too much. Of course, one of the first things that we, of course, have to highlight is the red card that happened near the end of the first half.
Yeah. DJ, do you want to walk us through the red card?
A stupid play and ended as stupidly as you could have. Like, I don't know what Reyes was thinking. You put your arm up and throw it back against the dude. And
so this is off a Fire free kick outside of the box. A Fire house, like, it was a relatively dangerous area. Maybe it would just like 25, 27 yards out and off to one side. So, but we're not talking about like, from the spot or something like that. And then before the free kick is taken, I was going to throw that back to you, DJ.
Seconds before the free kick is taken. If he could have just waited like 3 seconds before throwing the punch, that would have been a real nice penalty kick for us.
Andres Reyes starts to get in motion. Reyes starts to get in motion and just like flicks his wrist up and basically punches Toby Salquist in the face. This was, I want to say, like, it happened just before the 39th minute started. And it took until the 41st minute or 42nd minute for the play to be reviewed and then go to VAR. Which, by the way, the referee, when he is showing the decision, he almost like he like tells like a story in like 3 parts where he's walking and he like does like the VAR like check complete signal thing. He takes out the yellow card out of his pocket and then he just shakes his head no and then puts it back in and then takes out the red card to show Reyes the red card. And I'm like, I didn't know that like referees were supposed to be this much of storytellers.
Got to wave off the yellow, however he does it, right?
Yeah. I guess it makes sense to like show it so that way everyone can see it.
Straight red. It would have been a penalty if the kick had been taken. But because the ball wasn't in motion, it's a straight red, and then the free kick was taken.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and from what I have been reading from some Red Bull folk, like, I guess Reyes does this from time to time, like, solid player, and then just has a complete mental lapse, does something stupid like this, and kind of puts his team behind the 8 ball, so to say. So I guess it's working out for the Fire, and our best play so far seems to be other teams screwing up on set pieces.
So basically, what I'm hearing is
The Fabian Herbert
Francisco
disease
Calvo,
is-
but better.
Yeah, that's another
Yeah.
good shout. Yeah.
Fair.
I was about to say that sounds extremely familiar.
I mean, Fabian Herbert's will reliably get 2 or 3 incredibly stupid cards every year. I mean, this is what like Carlos Duran just had one 2 matches ago. So
yeah. So, red card happens, and before that red card, we were seeing essentially what we were talking about in the last episode, previewing the Red Bulls, and that they were going to play their system that they've been playing under Schwarz. Basically just, biding their time and being explosive on the attack when they do end up receiving the ball. By the time the red card happened, that sort of was like that sort of play was pushed back a bit. That high press sort of dissipated, but at the same time, watching the second half, the Fire had, I guess, the ball a bit more. They were moving it forward a bit more, but it almost made no difference. Like, you almost couldn't notice that Rebel were playing with 10 instead of 11.
Agreed. Here's the difference though. In the opening, say 15 minutes or so of the game, it was 100% Red Bulls. The Fire started getting a little bit of play in, somewhere around like the 15-minute mark. Then it was mostly Red Bull and kind of back and forth. Neither team seemed really dominant, although I think the Red Bull looked like they had better pressure. They were certainly testing Chris Brady more than the Fire were testing Carlos Coronel. But after the red card, the Fire had a lot more of the possession, but I don't think that it ever really felt like they were that goal dangerous.
Yeah, the way I looked at this game, the first half to me was the Fire were playing your typical away team going up against a better opponent. They're going to weather the first 15, 20 minutes. They're going to sit back. They're going to be pragmatic when they counterattack, and they'll let the Red Bulls kind of control the pace of the game and see what counterattacks they can launch. It was a very, again, typical away game strategy. And then the red card happened, and I'm like, oh, I think they could probably push for something here. If not at the end of the first half, definitely let's run these guys down. I think we forget Van Zier left relatively earlier in this game too. So not only are the Red Bulls down a man, but Van Zier, one of their top players, is also off the pitch.
Yeah, he got subbed out like almost immediately after the red card and when they were doing the concussion protocol on Salquist.
Yeah, so I don't know if he picked up a knock or if they just saw something or other, but man, this was the perfect time for the Fire to push and really be more aggressive, especially coming out of the locker room. But like you guys have been saying, like we all saw, it was just another game for them. To me, it was 2 completely different games in each half, and the Fire just went and played their usual style of, I've heard it described as whatevering, as they do that second half.
Yeah, they kept on trying to just go advance the ball down the pitch enough to get across. The number of times, and this is the thing that bothers me the most, because I saw it so often in this match, in a game when the Fire were playing up a man in the second half. Everything slows down when they get towards the opposing goal. Like, it just slows down. You have every player that, it's like they get to the box and then they just stop and they stand and then they go at a walking pace somewhere. And you're not going to unsettle a well-organized defense at that point. And Red Bulls, like their high press became a low block really quickly. Like they know how to not concede goals. Like they only allowed 36 goals last season. Different head coach this year, which, fine, but like they didn't forget how to defend, and Sandro Schwarz has clearly been drilling his team to use the same kind of defensive rhythms and patterns and stuff like that, because they look as good or better on defense than they did last year when they were one of the stingiest teams in MLS.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was in awe of how quickly they transitioned from what they wanted to do at the start of the first half to that defensive set in the second half. That is a well-drilled team for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty sure if you were a Red Bull fan, you enjoy watching what Schwarz is doing for that team. And yeah, no, there were moments, I guess, of possible goals on either side. The goalposts have been a major factor in nothing really going in.
3 saves by the post.
Yeah, 3 saves. Chris Brady, 1. So the Red Bulls had 19 shots that match, which is just, I mean, and Brady had to be very sharp early on, making a number of key saves, kind of like getting in the path of the ball before a technical shot was taken a number of times. He was sharp. I mean, like Frankie Amaya in like the 16th minute had an absolute beauty of a shot. Like it was like a laser that almost made it in. I mean, Lewis Morgan had a shot on target in the 6th minute. Like so many early shots. Like it really could have been a 2 or 3-0 game before the red card happened. And ironically, the best chances of the second half, I think that it's fair to say, I don't know, somebody disagree with me if they want, but were the Red Bulls on that play where 2 shots went off the woodwork in about 3 seconds. One, pinged off the woodwork and then it was recovered and then it like hit the other post opposite from it. It's one of those, like there's a soccer god somewhere that is pulling for the fire between those shots hitting the post and like the wind carrying Kellen Acosta's ball like that to get the game winner against Montreal. Like there is some universe, like some force in the universe that's pulling for the fire. But despite that, I mean, it was only able to guarantee the fire a 0-0 draw on this one.
Yeah, no.
I blame Quetzalcoatl.
All right. Yeah, no. Emil Forsberg and Lewis Morgan were just causing havoc, honestly, whether it was 10 men, 11 men, wind or no wind, that they were creating the better chances in both halves, in my opinion.
So, question to everyone on this. Frank Klopas ran with the same starting 11 that won the game against Houston. No changes, which meant that Brian Gutierrez started on the bench for the second time this season. Chris Mueller started on the left wing in the spot that Guti normally occupies when Shaqiri is in the lineup. Arnaud Souquet also started on the right, in the right like back or like right wing back position. Over, I guess it would have been Jonathan Dean that would have been the other obvious choice at that spot. Were you guys surprised that there weren't any changes made?
No. Klopas, I'm going to be honest. Klopas seems like the type of coach that if it worked once, it will work again, which kind of sucks.
I'm with you on that one, DJ. I think they just rinse and repeat. I will, DJ, disagree with you, though. I don't think it's Quetzalcoatl. I think it's probably a Greek god that's pulling for someone in there, just given our lineup here. But, yeah, Klopas is just going to rinse and repeat. He's going to run out what he think worked last time. I was hoping to see Gutierrez get back in the starting lineup because I think he just needs to have some confidence instilled in him. I was fine with him getting benched last game because his play had digressed over the first, since the Philly game, really, since the opener. And I thought with that goal, he probably got some confidence back, and I would have liked to see him be rewarded for that. But I would have rather seen him come in for Haile Selassie. I like Mueller out on the left. I think he stretched the field. If you look at the passing charts over the last couple of games with him in the starting lineup, you can see they're more spread out. They're using more of the field. But at this point, does Klopas just have, I don't know, he just doesn't know what to do with the team? Does he not think he has the right players? Or is he just kind of the vibes guy that everyone says he is? And I'm leaning towards the latter.
So when, in his decision to keep Gutierrez out of the lineup, after the Houston game in the press conference, he cited basically just Gutierrez's youth. He said that, like, with how young he is and how demanding the game is, not just physically, but also mentally, said that as the reason for limiting his meds. Now, I agree with you. Like, it made sense to take him out after the Atlanta game, at least, put him on the bench, which is what happened, because that game was terrible from Guti. It was just like, it was a very forgettable performance, and it was way under what his level really is. I would argue that Shaqiri over the past 2 games, with the exception of a few plays, was more or less at that level. I think that this game in particular, he had a performance that was on par for being as bad as Guti's was against Atlanta. He just was not quick enough at any phase. Like whether it was physics or diving, I don't know, but he was like, he was beaten by guys cleanly enough where his butt was on the ground more than once in the course of this match.
Well, you said it. The Red Bulls' best opportunity came when Shaqiri started dribbling backwards and tried to draw a foul going towards his own goal to bail him out. And the referee, I think correctly, didn't call it, and that led to that double post.
Yeah. It really reminds me of there was this guy that had tickets next to the seats that we'd normally be at when I was a kid going to Shrewsbury Town games, which, you know, in League One most of the time that I was going to them, that would start yelling at the team, being like, "You're going that way! You're going that way! You're going the wrong way!" Whenever like passes backwards happen, it's like there's one direction that the field is.
Yeah. I think I've said it in a previous episode, just like we mentioned, the backwards passing, the getting into the final third and slowing down. It just reminds me so much of the Polish national team and how they've been playing for the past like decade or so. And, you know, it's worked in the beginning, you know, like around like, especially like Euro 2016, but then afterwards it got old and now it's not doing so hot.
Yeah, Kalen Carr even pointed it out on the broadcast. He called out Shaqiri for every first touch he had going backward, going away from the attack. And I don't know if that's just how he likes to kind of set up the other team or get the ball onto his left foot, but the fact of the matter is every touch he took was negative in that match, and it's not helping the offense. It's not helping Kuipers, that's for sure.
Especially against a team that does build itself around a high press. So they love nothing more than the idea of a fire like center back or fire like a fullback having the ball on their feet in an advantageous field position. Like that's their game model. So why play into it?
Yeah, I think we're just lucky that Forsberg had an off night. Like he seemed to be more worried about the referee's calls than getting some shots off, and those turnovers that Shaqiri and others are making. He could have had one easily in that match, I think. And so we're pretty lucky about that.
Yeah, and Van Zier, you know, leaving as early as he did, like the red card from like there's times that you think I don't want to say you really earn a red card, but there's times that the way that you're playing, the way that you're like beating people on the ball and stuff like that makes it more likely that you are going to get cards in your favor because you're frustrating opponents with how you're playing. The Fire were not really doing that. Like this was just like I don't know where, like it's like Reyes's head, like his brain disconnected from his body for a moment, and that's the reason that red card happened.
Yeah, and I don't see Salquist as being like an instigator. Like I don't know if he was doing anything to get on his nerves in the box or, you know, tugging jerseys or kicking ankles or whatever. It didn't seem like any of that to me.
Yeah, it did kind of feel like the Carlos Duran red card against Atlanta, where it was just like the way that it happened was just completely unnecessary and unprovoked. It was just like, again, like brain disconnect from body.
Yeah.
It's mildly frustrating, though you can see it as a half glass full that, you know, oh, it's the first clean sheet of the season. It's against a team that is, you know, top or near top of the table. But still, it feels like the vibe should be a bit more different.
Yeah, I've seen that a lot going around too on the message boards and things. People, oh, we drew the best team in the league in their building. But I go back to my original point, like this was a different game the second half, and the Fire did not take advantage of it. I mean, you guys feel good taking a point at Red Bulls after this match?
Like, again, like if you said, like I predicted a draw in our panel, which is, I thought it was going to be 1-0 because everyone on our panel for our preview from the writers at Minute Red 97 all predicted at least 4 goals going. Like it was like I predicted 2-2, people predicted like 4-1. It was at least 4 goals from everyone. So it's like, well, you know, this is how you guarantee it's going to be like a 1-0 something. But it turns out it was a 0-0. And like if you had offered a 0-0, you know, to me on like Saturday at like 4 PM, I would have taken it because, like that's a fairly solid result. But the way that it happened with the Fire not being able to take advantage of having an extra player on the pitch for, like 48 minutes. I mean, that just makes it feel like this again is a team that still doesn't really have an offensive plan that works and is able to unsettle decent defenses in the league.
There were so
I was
many
waiting
times
for someone to step up.
during the game where the pass was just not good. The guy didn't go to the pass, or the pass was behind them. Even just down to passing is bad. And Shaqiri was horrible tonight with passing. If the pass was just a little bit too far in front of him, he just gave up. There is very little that I think would help the team right now in terms of getting rid of players, except for getting rid of Shaqiri and getting someone in, or finally putting Guti at attacking mid like he should be the entire time.
Yeah, and again, like this is why it was surprising to me that Gutierrez didn't start. Now, I think that you're right, Nick. Like, it feels to me like Chris Mueller has lost a step since pre-injury. Like, he just doesn't have that burst of absolute insane, like ludicrous level speed that he did before he was injured. But he still is a dangerous attacker. He like spreads the pitch. He makes it wider in a way that like the Fire were getting nothing on that left hand of the pitch for multiple games. And putting Mueller in, I think, has been really helpful there. But not having... But then the question is, so if you want to keep on Mueller, and like Mueller was only in the starting 11 because Guti was out, essentially, who do you pull out? And I think that like it just feels like the answer at this point should be Shaqiri, just because, I mean, again, like give him credit for that perfectly weighted pass that led to Guti's goal. Where again, he just had 4 touches on the ball. Like that's the thing. It was 4 touches from the time that it happened to the time that it left his feet. And then Gutierrez had 1 touch for that goal. We didn't see Shaqiri doing anything even remotely similar to that in this match.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. And I like I said, I was waiting for someone to step up that second half. The game was there. The starters who hadn't been subbed out yet, the subs were all coming in. The game was there and no one wanted to take it. I want to ask you guys too, how do you feel about Haile Selassie? Because I mean, I'm on the fence with him. I like that he wants to be aggressive, but when you've got Kuipers standing in the middle of the box, why are you looking to get the ball to him? So I'm like on the fence if we should pull him and keep Mueller and Gutierrez and Shaqiri in.
I mean, he certainly has. I thought started the season flying. I think that he's probably regressed some.
I think right now it's at that point where you can make a very good argument that Mueller and Haile Selassie should be on the bench. They should be starting on the bench because if you can bring Haile Selassie into the match and Mueller, that is a great bench. But the problem is, yeah, Haile Selassie is definitely not. He's not at the level he was last year. Is that because the last year was a fluke, or I don't know. I think it's just a case of if the Fire can do something that they're both on the bench, coming off the bench, that's a great depth piece. End of story.
Yeah, fair shout. You know, a fluky 6-goal season to lead the team, right?
Mm.
It's one of those like the bad joke that people have made about the Fire roster for a while is that they actually do have great bench players. The problem is that they're called starters.
Da, 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 da.
Like that.
But having said that, I think that it seems so. For starters, I think Haile Selassie's 2 worst games of the season have been the last 2 games, and both of them were the only games that Arnaud Souquet was behind him for this season. And I wonder if that communication issue is part of it, because Marin does kind of get back on defense. I think that he somewhat depends on communicating with whoever's like in the wing back position behind him for who's going wide, who's going, and that makes me think that like maybe that's part of the issue. Although I'm not willing to 100% chalk it up to that. It is, I think, something to consider. Having said that, like at the very least, I'm hoping that in advance of the Real Salt Lake game, that Klopas won't run out the same starting 11 that we saw this time and is willing to make some significant changes. Partly just to tell players, like send the message that like what I saw from you last week was not good enough.
I'm not going to lie. I get a feeling that if the next couple of games go the way the last you have, Lobos is not going to have to worry about making any more decisions.
He certainly seemed, in the press conference after the match, he certainly seemed less composed than I've ever seen Frank Lopez in a press conference, because he is just an expert at talking to the media. He's an expert at the way that he is able to communicate his view on what happened after matches. The press conference started very late. It was, I think, over a half an hour after the final kick, which is unusual. And he seemed, to say the very, very least, to put it politely, frustrated. So I do wonder if maybe DJ's right, and that's because he's feeling he's sitting on a bit of a hot seat.
I'm kind of going on an off tangent. I still don't think Boss wanted to be the manager. I think they basically told him he was, but that's besides the point. Hence why he's probably like, really, you guys are ruining my legacy for this?
Yeah, obviously, I think that it's fair to say that, like, whatever we think about the performance lately, like, he would do anything for the club, including doing a job that he doesn't really want to have, to make the club, if he thought it could help the club or had a chance at helping the club.
It's a shame, really.
I know there's not a video of this, but we're all just kind of shaking our heads right now. Like, there's really not much to say, right?
Because it feels like a broken record. Kind of, honestly. Just, we've been saying these things for the past few weeks that our listeners are like, well, yeah, I think we've heard this one before. So, yeah. I think we can leave Harrison, New Jersey right now, if that's all right.
Never happier to leave a place.
Yeah.
Than New Jersey.
All right. Well, before we preview our next MLS game, we're going to preview the Fire 2's U.S. Open Cup game against Indy 11. That's happening this Wednesday, if I'm correct, right?
Wednesday, 7:00. Tickets this time are not free for the Fire 2 match. I believe that they're $5 for supporters and season ticket holders, and I think that it's $10 for everyone else. I believe that parking is still free, so I think that it's like a $5 to $10 all-in situation. Even
though supporters and season ticket holders were supposed to get complimentary U.S. Open Cup seats, but that's beside the point.
I don't think that was ever actually promised. I thought that was just the one Leagues Cup match.
I don't know, because a lot of I've read on social media from different Fire supporters that there was supposed to be an Open Cup or like Open Cup tickets in there as well.
So this match is one of the first 3 matches in history that is in an actual competitive sense between an MLS Next Pro squad and a USL Championship squad, which is interesting. Technically, it's the third of the 3 because there are 2 7 p.m. Eastern kickoffs, so 6:00 in Chicago, between the USL Championship side and MLS Next Pro team. But this is going to be one of the first, the same way that the Fire had like the first game against USL League One side in a competitive match last round against Forward Madison. And this again is it's a team that has kind of like DNA connections with the Fire because Peter Wilt was involved in founding and starting Indy 11. They have a number of players that, like, it's been a destination for a number of Fire players over the years. They've been in existence for about a decade. Currently, Elliot Collier, who I think that a lot of Fire fans will remember from recent seasons, is a Indy 11 player. And Lawrence Wooten, who was a Fire draft pick this offseason, pretty well heralded guy, but from England, so therefore takes up an international slot, which made him like a little bit less attractive as a draft prospect. Is on loan to Indy 11, and he would be eligible for what I believe would be his first minutes for Indy 11, since he was an unused sub in their previous match on Saturday.
Swinging. So we still have a bunch of first team players that are available for the game in terms of first team Fire players for the Fire 2. Do you have a list this time? Because I remember last time you weren't exactly ready when I asked that.
I did put together a list this time. So Georgios Kousias is technically available now, given the offensive firepower that Fire 2 head coach Ludovic Talendier has at his disposal. I suspect that Kousias will not be going down. Richie is available. Patrick Loss has the 16-year-old goaltender has been having a heck of a start to his MLS Next Pro season and did a good job the first 2 matches in the Open Cup campaign. So I suspect that Richie will not be getting minutes. Tom Barlow would technically be eligible. Again, like I'm not really sure that like loaning strikers is really what Talendier would be asking for. Federico Navarro, which would be interesting. I think that just his tenacity on the ball is something that would be useful, just especially given his age and experience, because like even though he's young, he's a lot older than most of the Fire 2 players. That's a possibility. I would somewhat doubt it. An kind of intriguing possibility is Andrew Gutman. He would be eligible on account of the fact that he's only played a couple of minutes just with when his injury happened. I suspect he won't be available. Last week in the midweek press conference, Frank Klopas said that that Andrew Gutman had just started doing some on-ball activities in training, but was still training separately and hadn't been cleared for training with the full squad. So unless that's changed, I don't think he would be ready for minutes, but obviously that would be a way to sort of condition him in and get him a little bit of the rust, an opportunity to get some of the rust off in advance of making a like Fire first team appearance or start. Jeff Gall, again, goaltenders like probably not what's Talendier would be looking for, but Gall is frequently the backup for Fire 2 matches. Wyatt Omsberg is a possibility. We did see him play 45 minutes in the previous Open Cup match. That I think could be useful, and I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if Omsberg did make an appearance. I don't know if they'd want to restrict it just to 45 minutes, given that it's now a higher tier second division squad as opposed to like another third division squad. Just wanting someone that is like has his both like size and skill and experience on the back line, I think could be useful. Javier Casas Jr., who will get minutes for the Fire 2, and Serge Orhel, who also is going to get minutes for the Fire 2 at some point. Would be the other names that would be eligible?
I mean, I'm looking forward to this matchup. I think the Fire are going to have to make some roster decisions, just like you're saying, Tim. And I think that's kind of been a weakness for this organization over the last couple of years of how they bring players up and down and how they work between CF2 and with the senior team. I'd like to see some of those CF2 guys get a few more MLS minutes, and especially now with the first team struggling on offense. Like, let's bring some competition. Let's bring some of these guys up. So I would love to see them take full advantage of this U.S. Open Cup opportunity and say, hey, we're winning games here against good competition now. Give us a look for the first team. I think that would be a great thing to see. And I also am excited to see how they match up with Indy 11. And I remember going to an Indy 11 game in 2019, talking to some of their reps, and they're like, we've got a 5-year plan to get this club ready to be in MLS. And wouldn't you know it, it's 5 years later. They're playing against an MLS club in US Open Cup. They've got all these new stadium designs and things going on. So to me, it's a good measuring stick for both of these clubs.
Agreed. And their stadium, I believe, is scheduled to open in 2025. It's going to be like a 20,000 seater stadium, a few blocks away from where the Colts play. So it should be. I mean, it looks like it's going to be a very like nice, like modern looking stadium. Indy 11, by the way, in addition to having like in terms of MLS interest, for Fire fans, Elliot Collier, they have a new head coach in Sean McCauley, who, if the name seems familiar, that was the interim head coach after Minnesota United fired their head coach midway through last season, or actually almost all the way through last season. They announced that they were going to keep him on as interim. And then a week later, Sean McCauley said, no, that's it, I'm out. And the reason he was out was he was offered a head coaching gig, his first head coaching gig in his career at Indy 11. So the team's been kind of like shifting things up tactically with him in attendance. So it should be like an interesting match. And I think that it's going to be a very good yardstick for the Fire too. They have so much offensive talent. They have Ludovic Talendier is, I think, playing genuinely interesting, fun to watch soccer. Like, I think all three of you have seen, at least Fire 2 in the Open Cup. Like, like, what do you think about the way the team has played?
Definitely more exciting than what we've seen with the Fire first team. I've now been to more Fire 2 and Red Stars games than the actual like Fire first team games, and it was the two Open Cup games were genuinely exciting. Not only because the fact that we won and progressed, further into the next round, there were just a lot of fun moments where, even if they weren't scoring goals, the opportunities were really close, either, being saved by the keeper or just going wide. But it had you a bit more on the edge of your seat than like maybe with how the Fire first team have been playing, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, they play a fun brand of soccer. Like it's fun to watch. Like if they win, it's obviously more fun for Fire fans. If they don't win, I still think it's a fun brand of soccer to watch.
And Indy 11's given up 15 goals in 6 matches this year. So, if Google searches can be trusted, this could be a good opportunity to keep that fun brand going.
I will say,
I spoke to
the last Open Cup game I went with the Fire. All I remember is, holy cap, it was cold. I'm glad it ended on time.
Yeah. Hopefully this one will be a lot warmer. I don't think snow is in the forecast. It's crazy, DJ. It's like Florida temperatures here. It's like it was like nearly 80 degrees at one point. But I spoke to David Ziemba, the president of the Brickyard Battalion, the sort of like version of Section 8 for Indy 11 earlier today, and for a piece that's going to be coming out on Tuesday, basically an opposition report for the match. And he said basically their squad, like, they're going to give up goals. The plan is that they will score more goals than they give up. And so far that hasn't really worked out that well for them in their league season. They've only got one win. But I mean, again, just with the way the Fire 2 play, like, I think it's going to be a very interesting, entertaining match. And it's again going to be a thing where, like, most of the Indy 11 players, like, the age overlap between the two squads is almost nil. Like, the oldest Fire 2 players are probably around the same age as the youngest Indy 11 players. So,
predictions. Do we think the Fire 2 are going to make the next round?
Fire 2, 3, Indy 11, 1.
All right.
I'll go Fire 2 in PKs after a nice 2-2 match.
Oh, please don't. I don't want to have to be there through extra time. It's already covering those matches is already so late on a Wednesday night, getting all the way down to Bridgeview. But I mean, I'd be happy if that was the ultimate result. But I think it's going to be a 3-2 victory. I just think that Talendier has a squad that is performing. They are starting to hum. They came back from a 4-0 deficit in MLS Next Pro on Sunday as we're recording. They ended up making it to 5-5 and losing in penalty kicks afterwards. But their first penalty kick loss of the season, they have offensive power. They have grit. They have like a never say die attitude. So,
you think that'll carry over? You think they're going to feel either tired legs? You think they're going to feel like an emotional letdown after this huge comeback? Or is it just, keep riding it and keep going?
So Talendier has talked about how young his team is and the need to sort of like help them through issues like that with just like motivation and things like that. I think that he will be able to get a squad motivated. And I think that they got a point out of this, even though it's like a loss in the shootout. And I think that that's what he'll talk about and what he'll focus on is they were down and out and they were able to get points out of nothing.
All right. I have to go around the lines of Nick that it's going to be probably in PKs or extra time. So that is the case. Get ready for extra soccer down at Bridgeview.
Woo!
On a Wednesday.
Soccer.
Woo.
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't?
But I mean, like I said, in case I didn't sell it hard enough earlier, like I do hope that everyone comes out. I mean, it should be a good game. If there are traveling Indy 11 supporters that are going to be arriving, they will, try to counter, I guess, the Fire 2 supporters in terms of like volume and everything else. More Fire supporters would be great. They play a fun game of soccer. Both teams do. I mean, like, again, like the Indy 11 is a little more like run and gun, like goals both ways. I think the Fire 2 are, I want to say like a little bit more coherent. And I think that the high end talent on the Fire 2 is more than what Indy 11 has, but it's, they're also an experienced squad that has more continuity than the Fire 2 have had this season. So it should be a good game. And I hope that like, if you're thinking about coming out, like I do encourage you to come out.
Amen, I say to that. All right. Well, we only really have one more topic, and that is, of course, the MLS game that is happening at Soldier Field against Real Salt Lake. They are 3-3-2 with 12 points. Their most recent form is 2 draws, 2 wins, and a loss. The most previous result was 0-0 against Columbus Crew. So, I mean, we
2 teams coming off of not scoring a goal or having a clean sheet the previous match.
That is true. That is true.
So buckle up, fans, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be a
This could
bumpy
be a real
ride.
barn burner of no one scoring anything. No, I wouldn't anticipate this would be a 0-0 game. I don't know about you guys.
No. Someone's got to break the deadlock.
I feel like Arango has been like up and down. It's like every other game he'll find a goal or 2 or something like that. So I fully expect him to score 1 this week.
Yeah, that seems like a safe bet. I mean, all things considered. But I mean, honestly, it's such a bizarre, like a 0-0 draw against Columbus, by the way, is not a bad result. I still think that Columbus are the best team in the league in terms of like the overall skill level and the way they play. So, Chicho Arango, I mean, he had a hat trick against Real Salt Lake, or sorry, against why am I saying that? Against St. Louis at the end of March. So like that's just 3 matches ago. I think like the hat trick was in like 20 minutes. Like it was fast. Wow. And then a goal against Minnesota. So yeah, he's a guy that can score.
Well, hopefully with the way the team has been defensively, both actual defense and the soccer gods, whether it's the wins or the goalposts, will stay on our side. And hopefully Frank Klopas, as well as our forwards, will figure something else. Because, as I said in the previous episode, feed my man, Hugo Kuipers. He is hungry.
Yeah, once again, Hugo Kuipers' most active play was like coming back, and like he has some good hold-up play. Like I should never say Hugo Kuipers has good hold-up play. Like that, it shouldn't come up.
No.
Like it.
Guys, I'm trying to scroll here. I think the one thing in our favor is that we're playing a Western Conference team. Why have the Fire been so much better against Western Conference opponents over the last couple seasons? I don't know.
It is incredible. Like they didn't have a loss against a Western Conference opponent until very late last. Like it. I mean, I we could try to flex and say that it's because the Eastern Conference really is so much better, which I think there's an element of truth to. Like there's a lot more complete Eastern Conference teams. And then there's a team with an absolutely terrible defense and also, Lionel Messi. So, but
I think that might be a record for an MLS podcast. We've gone, just over an hour before mentioning Leo Messi? That's got to be a record.
Oh, we've gone a entire podcast without mentioning that, dude.
That is true.
We actually normally don't. I think this is the first time this season that we've mentioned.
And I sometimes explicitly try to be like, oh, that one small Argentinian from Rosario.
Yeah. I like it.
I don't mention him by name unless absolutely necessary.
But back to teams that are actually playing the Fire next week. Real Salt Lake have been incredibly stingy on defense. I mean, 8 matches into the season, they've only let in 8 goals. So like letting in a goal per game, I mean, is nothing to scoff at. And again, like when you look at like who they've played, like Columbus last week. They're a team that can, score goals. Minnesota with some high-end attacking talent, although no Reynoso right now. St. Louis, who again had a lot of scored a ton of goals the previous season. Vancouver, who are good and are just fun to watch and can just kill you in transition and stuff like that.
It could just kill you, period.
Well, that too. Colorado Rapids under Chris Armas, which who knows how they're doing better than I thought they would with Chris Armas. So I guess there's that. LAFC, they beat LAFC 3-0. And they got a red card in that match. So
well, that was the weather gods helping them out in that one too, I think.
It was. That was the snow game. So we'll see. So you know what? We've got soccer weather gods favoring both the Fire and Real Salt Lake. So we'll see which way they turn for this one.
We'll see.
I'll burn some incense. We'll figure it out.
Amen. Prediction, gentlemen. What are we going to do against that team from Utah? Who, fun fact, they're going to have a hockey team in a bit.
Oh, look at that.
RIP Arizona
I started putting together... Yeah, I started putting together my notes for my show. I record on Monday nights, and I just stopped when I got to my prediction line, and I'm just staring at it. I was like, all right, I want to be positive here. We're coming back home against the Western Conference opponent. The team's got to respond. They did it after that Atlanta match, coming home and beating Houston, but it feels different. I'm going to say it's a 2-2 draw, and I guess I'm all about the draws tonight, but I would not be shocked if we see RSL walk away with a 3-1 or 3-0 victory either.
Ooh.
So you're not basically you want to believe, but you're finding it hard to believe based on what you've seen on the pitch over the past couple matches.
Exactly. When have the Fire scored? They scored 2 goals once this season.
Well, they scored 4 once this season.
Oh yeah, that's right. It's the gods. That's right. I forgot that Montreal game. That seems like another season ago after everything we've watched since then. But yeah, to me the offense just isn't there, and so I have a hard time getting to 2 goals for them.
Oh, the epic highs and lows of Major League Soccer, specifically the Chicago Fire.
I don't know. What do you guys think?
I've had a hard time making a choice here too. I think that the frustrating thing with the Fire is that with the talent that is on the pitch, you just feel like there should be more. You feel like you should be seeing more than what you've been seeing the past few matches. And we can talk about strong performances from people. We didn't talk about Alan Aragoni, who I thought again had a really strong performance playing as kind of an inverted fullback, which I didn't think was a thing and really isn't much of a thing, but he's done a good job on on the side that it's not natural to him. But this is loser merit points. So it's you get a certificate. It's like giving a kid a sticker to make them feel better. You get something, but I mean, it doesn't seem like a team that's really trying to grab victories. But I still think that the team has the possibility of getting it together and having a cohesive defensive performance. So I think 2-1 is a realistic possibility. Now, they do have to play Chicho Arango and they have to contain him in a way that a lot of teams can't. But I don't think it's out of the realm of what the team's capable of.
Do you think Klopas goes very tight in his defensive formation, even though we're at home? We've seen him do that against other good strikers on the road and try and clog up the middle. But do you think he does it at home now?
I mean, I think that if he does, that 2 goals for prediction goes out the window, because I think that we saw what happens when the team focuses on defense. We saw that, and this isn't just a Klopas thing. That dates back to what we saw from Ezra Hendrickson, where the Gagos Lunita got a bunch of clean sheets because the team was committing 11 players to defense 100% of the time and only opportunistically going on attack, which was great for Gagos Lunita's transfer value, but not really great from the team trying to get points.
For sure.
Yeah. I'm in that very similar boat of I want to be optimistic based on what we have on paper, but I'm not based on what we've seen in theory and what we've seen in practice. I'm going to go ahead and say it's going to be, because I still want to be an optimist, because by George, I need to be in these rough and trying times. I'm going to go ahead and say it's going to be very similar to the last time the Fire have played RSL at Soldier Field, 1-0, simple.
Nice.
I'm going to say it's going to be a 2-0 game. I'm not going to say which team. I'm going to say it's going to be 2-0. Someone's going to score, and then it's just going to go downhill from there, get another goal. That's, yeah.
The fact that you say downhill, not uphill.
Oh, no.
Listen, one of the guys is going to score, and then the team's just going to be like, screw it. And they're just going to,
Yeah. All right. Well, gentlemen, is there anything else that needs to be said about what we've mentioned? RSL, Indy 11, Harrison, New Jersey.
I'm looking forward to my Zach Thornton bobblehead. That's what I'm looking forward to.
Oh yeah, Zach Thornton's going into the Ring of Fire.
I'm pretty sure the last time someone got inducted into the Ring of Fire was CJ Brown at an RSL game, now that I think about it. And Ante Rezov, actually.
Huh. Well, would you look at that? Maybe that's how they planned it. Maybe they're like history.
They're like, we need to give people some reason to go see RSL. There's no other.
Yeah. They have to find a reason for people to go watch Real Salt Lake Super Soakers. We're a comedy podcast now.
Always have been.
I forgot about the slide whistle. Yeah, someone mentioned that we should get a slide whistle now that we're a comedy podcast. Gosh darn it.
We should really just have slide whistles for every supporter should be issued a slide whistle. And that should be like, we can do that instead of having people.
We actually were issued a bunch of kazoos at the Red Stars game yesterday, which was a funny moment. So I feel like kazoos or slide whistles could either work.
They're in the same family. Like they're friends.
Yeah.
Kazoos and slide whistles. Yeah.
I feel like a kazoo makes more sense for us, honestly. Just a kazoo of Careless Whisper.
It's a Careless Whisper. How did that become a Fire anthem?
We now need Alan to record. There's going to be a special episode coming up where Alan does Careless Whisper on kazoo.
Stay tuned. That's on the Patreon if we ever get that one. All right.
Well worth it.
Well worth it. Amen. I say to that. Well, thank you as always to my lovely co-hosts Tim and DJ. Thank you to you, lovely ladies and gentlemen, and they, them of the Fire for listening. I was saving the best for last. Jeez Louise, Tim, you've thrown me off.
God dang it, Tim. And we haven't even, Alan hasn't even mentioned Connor Bedard yet.
Now you've mentioned him.
Can't be finished.
Okay, well, I'm not going to mention him.
Doesn't matter.
I'm not mentioning him. Nick, Glasshouse Soccer, thank you for joining us. Why don't you let our lovelies know where they can find you if they already don't know?
Yes, I am on social media at Glasshouse Soccer, and you can search for the Feed the Fire podcast wherever you get your podcast. Looking forward to connecting with everybody and seeing you all at the RSL game.
Swinging. See, it was coming, Tim. Patience.
Come on, man.
We have fun here.
Man, mentioning Messi and Bedard in the same podcast. This is dark days for the Bonfire.
Well, I mean, not really. I mean, the Bonfire is quite lit, I think, in my opinion.
I mean, my glass is empty, so if you want to talk about things that are lit.
Truly, we're a comedy podcast. Well, from me, Alan the Pole with the Gold, DJ Tim, and special guest Nick, Glasshouse Soccer, we all say, come on, you men in red.